Welcome to the Writers Center's virtual craft chat series, where we talk with writers a little less about what they wrote and a little bit more about how they wrote it. My name is Zach Powers. I am a short story writer, I am a novelist, and I am the director of communications at the Writers Center. So I'm really, really excited to talk some fiction today. I get to do the fiction chats most of the time. I fight Amy for them. And I'm really excited for this because I really enjoyed reading this book. So Estela Gonzalez, please, thanks for joining us so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, thank you all at the Writers Center. This is when you asked me to do this, I was like, what? Oh my goodness, my first craft chat. So I was very excited. Thank you again.
Do you have your book handy so you could read a little excerpt?
And like you, I haven't gotten my copy, hence why I put the poster up. This is, the cover, but I do have the galleys. So I will read a couple of pages. So this is from the first story, the titular story, Chola's Salvation. I'm just kicking back, drinking my dad's Schlitz, when Frida Kahlo and the Virgen de Guadalupe walk into our restaurant. La Frida is in a man's suit, a big baggy one, like the guy from the Talking Heads, but this one's black, not white. All her hair is cut off, so she isn't wearing no braids, no ribbons, no nothing. The only woman thing she has on are those hand earrings. I read in Mrs. Herrera's class that Pablo Picasso gave her those earrings because he thought she was a better painter than her husband. La Virgen looks like my tia Rosa in the picture she sent to Dad. She has blonde hair, lots of white eyeshadow, and she's wearing chola clothes. Tank top with those skinny little straps, baggy pants, and black hush puppy shoes. And she has on this lipstick like she just bit a chocolate cake. Her hair is so long, it touches the back of her feet. Her bangs are all sprayed up like a regular chola, but she wears a little gold crown. A badass mata loca sitting at the counter right in front of me. At first, I don't recognize them, but the moment I see Frida's unibrow and La Virgen's crown, I know. I really know for sure the moment Frida gives me a cigarette, even though there's this big old sign right at the counter saying, "Thank you for not smoking." I suck on it while La Virgen holds up a lighter. "¿Qué ondas, comadre?" Frida says, smiling. "What's up?" One of her teeth is missing, and some of the others are all brown. No wonder she never smiles on her paintings. I don't know what to say, so I just take another swig from the beer I have behind the counter. "Are you a shy girl?" La Virgen says. "Don't you know us, Esa?" "Man, sure, I know you guys," I shout. I always shout when I'm a little buzzed. "You want some coffee or something?" "Un cafecito y un platillo de menudo." "¿Y tú, Friducha?" "How about some pozole y unas cuantas tortillas de maíz?" she says. So I serve them their menudo, pozole, tortillas, and coffee. They tell me they're here to give me some advice, unos consejos. "And believe me, you're going to need the advice, preciosa," Frida says, "because your crazy mommy is going to let you have it with this whole quinceañera bullshit real soon." La Virgen nods and takes another puff. "We're here to tell you you better watch out," La Virgen says. "So we have some rules for you to live by. Like those 10 commandments Father Jorge taught you." "Yeah, but this isn't about God, Jesus, or some other Catholic laws," Frida says, ripping up her last tortilla. "It's about you, homegirl, and about your pinchy parents and this quinceañera they want to force down your throat," La Virgen tells me. "You probably don't want to hear it from me, especially since your mom is always throwing me in your face, saying how much you're hurting me every time you don't listen to her. But I want you to hear it from me, not something your mom picked up from your abuela." And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I first of all, I was hooked from paragraph one. Like I was like, oh, I was so excited, like immediately. So you had me with the introduction there. So I'm glad you started with the beginning, because I was hooked right away. So just real quickly, with my first question is who are you in your own words?
In my own words. I'm a Chicana from East LA who likes to write, not just about East LA, but about the people from East LA, which inspires my fiction and my poetry. I'm also a poet. And I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. I was just thinking about that, and it's like I'm the first one. My sister was the first one to get a graduate degree, though, in our family. But yeah, I'm a short story writer. I'm working on a novel, and hopefully I'll have a book of poetry out too
Oh,
someday.
I didn't know that you had poet on the resume too. That's great.
Yeah.
So the first question we like to ask our guests is sort of a broad one, can have some fun answers, but it's a little tough. So I'm sorry if it was a tough one. What's something you did while writing these stories, or something you do as a writer in general, that nobody has noticed before or commented upon?
Yeah, that was a difficult question. So I think what I do that I don't think I've noticed, I'm sure, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I like to focus on a particular part of LA, because LA, I don't know if people know this, is, it's a large area. I mean, it's 7.5, 8 square miles. That's big for me. But there's so much to it. There's so many dimensions to it. There are about 120,000 people living in this small space. And I focus on a particular era too. I focus on the 80s a lot. Some of them are in the 90s, some of them are earlier than that. But I think I have, I don't know, I have a more focused view on that particular era because I grew up in that era. I know another Chicano writer, Michael Jaime Becerra. He focuses on the 80s too, but he's in El Monte, which is it's not East LA, but it's there, right? It's also very much a Chicano Mexicano part of LA County, and we're in the county. We're not in the city proper. And most of my protagonists are working class too, and then come from working class. Actually, I guess it's not a new thing, but I'm focusing more on Chicanos and Mexicanos. In this particular area. And I want to portray their flaws as well as their inner strength that they draw on to maintain, their integrity when confronting conflict. I know it sounds like I'm reading this and I am. So I was really trying to it's like, what do I really do? But yeah, I think that's my thing. That's my jam. I focus on 80s East LA and mainly working class Mexicanos and Chicanos.
I love your comment though about the one that resonated. I mean, it's a great answer, but the acknowledging flaws, but also revealing inner strength. I thought that really is something, now that you say it, like I wouldn't have commented on that, but that's obviously something now looking back through all the stories, that was such a key part of what you're writing about is I can't remember the name of the story right now, but the mother who is working in a hotel and turning tricks on the side and pushes her daughter into doing it too. And it seems like how could you do this yourself and do that? But then it is a story sort of about her regaining inner strength. Anyway, that's really fascinating to me. So I'm glad you said that. That might be the best answer
good.
to that question we've had. So thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's Angry Blood. That's yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a great story. So
thank you.
So one thing I noticed about your writing was how well all your stories are grounded in scene. There's always a specific moment sort of framing everything. And we experience these moments as discrete. We like, a scene happens, we experience that, we move to the next scene. That's usually the structure of the stories. And that's interesting to me because I tend to write that way too. And it's not as common, especially in stories, you don't usually have that discreteness of the scenes like that. It happens with some people, but you thought you were really good at it. So
thank you.
Do you focus intentionally on staying in scene like this? Is that something you're striving for?
Yes, that is. I think what I try to do, they're like mini stories within a bigger story. And I think what I'm trying to do is I'm like, what is going on here? And try to stay in place. And it's a good way for me to slow down an action or maybe the plot of the story. I'm not very plot driven. I tend to be, I like to think that I'm more character driven. So this is what these discrete scenes do for me. And it's also gives me a chance to really look around, right? What's going on at the time? What does this place smell look, sound, feel like. I really try to incorporate a lot of the five senses into these scenes too when I can. That's something that I learned in grad school from Elena Maria Viramontes, who's another Chicana writer from East LA. She teaches at Cornell right now, and she was my chair for my MFA program. And I remember she was teaching one class and she held up her palm. It's like, when you tell a story, you want this. And we're like, what's that? And it's like the five senses, because this is how we interact with the world. And this is what you want your characters to do too. If you want full, layered characters, have them sense the world around them. And how do they react?
And it's interesting. Someone just in the chat for entering the raffle put Brian Washington's Lot as the book they put. And I actually, definitely, that was a book I would compare yours to in terms of, because he does sort of what you're doing, but Houston is his setting. I don't know if you've read the book, but he sort of has that sort of same return to the same place, lots of different characters, revelation of the era and the moment at large through that repetition. So thank you, Diana, for sharing Lot, because that may come up later. I may have actually had that in my question somewhere. I can't remember, but
all right.
Back to scenic writing, because you write in scene, but it's not like you don't have exposition and summary and backstory. I mean, they're sort of required. But how do you weave those things into a scene? Are there any techniques you look for? Is there anything specific you do to balance getting the information readers need to really understand, but maintaining the present moment?
Yeah, that was another good question. I was a little stumped. I'm like, how do I do this? I think it has to do with revision too. When I go back and read the story, does it make sense? Why is this character thinking this? Because, I taught composition for a while, and I would notice my students would write sentences, and I'm like, this is interesting, but why are you writing this? And it would be because students have like this background information that they assume everybody else has. And I think I do that too when I do my first drafts. I just assume, well, they're going to know this, or, this is something, that they should know. But I'm like, no, sometimes I reread the story and I'm like, why did I write this? Why am I saying this? So I have to go back and add, to it to help remind me. It's like, why is the character acting this way, or why they say this, or what's going on here? But I think that's what I tend to do more in my revision than I do in the first, written draft of it all. So does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. I think it's an important one, because I think I occasionally get a revision question in, but I think sometimes we don't appreciate the fact that some like really defining characteristics of writing aren't like that knack first draft. They're that hard work second, third, 15th, 35th draft where that thing that sort of defines us ends up coming out. So I think that's really helpful for writers to hear repeatedly and over again. So
yeah, I know. And and revision is the toughest part. I mean, a lot of people say that. I think Alma Mott has said that, and she's so right. She is so right. It's hard to go back and to revise and because you're like, oh, but it sounds so beautiful. It's like, no, it doesn't. You got to do this and this and this to it. And this is why you have writing groups too, but I'll talk about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a real quick reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. If anyone asked a question already, I definitely lost it as all the raffle entries were being put in. So please ask your question again if I missed any. Just one last question on scenic writing, because we hit at this a little bit with revision, but besides revision, do you have any tips for other writers when it comes to structuring work scenically?
Yeah, use the five senses. Make sure and it's not, because I think a lot, many, I remember when I first started off, I just would focus on the visual and maybe a little bit of sound, but you have to include the touch. What is the character touching, or even like wearing? I think I have one character wearing Shantung silk jumpsuit or something. And I'm like, yeah, the softness of it, or even the what is sound tasting. That's why I have a lot of food too, I think, in my stories, because I want, what are they tasting? Even if it's just the sour taste of beer or just their dried mouth, that's, I think that helps a lot. So
That's good for me to hear, because I think I ignore taste pretty much entirely. But that leads, so my next category was actually music and food. And because one of the things I really loved in the story collection throughout was the prevalence of those two elements. There's, starting with music, there are so many references to music in this book. There are lyrics included, single lines, usually not like whole songs. And I loved that. And it was also a genre of music with which I had zero familiarity. So it was also completely brand new to me. So it isn't just like nostalgia, me getting, oh, I know that song. It was none of that. And it still just worked so well and fit so well. So what's the role of specific musical reference, of the specific musical references that you include?
I think some of the music provides subtext to what's going on in the scene. I like to include some torchy songs in there, some Mexican ranchera torchy songs like Paloma, Cucurucucu by Lola Beltran, or Paloma Negra, Chavela Vargas. Those are torchy songs that I remember hearing my aunts and my father especially play when they were feeling like very melancholy. So that evokes that type of feeling. And I love pop music. I grew up on pop music. I mean, back in my day, I'm the MTV generation, right? Even though my parents couldn't afford MTV, we used to watch Friday Night Videos or any other, rip-off MTV type programs. But I used to listen to the radio all the time, and I still do. I still listen to like podcasts, and I listen to my 80s music whenever I'm doing anything. But I think it's, for me, what it does for stories, it's evokes it's supposed to evoke some type of emotion or reveal something about the character, especially if they like listening, like Angelina loves to listen to torchy music in Act of Faith. And because she's a torchy woman, her idea of romance has been shattered because of her cheating husband. So, having her listen to Lola Beltran just fit, or Chavela Vargas. And it's also a marker, I think. This is how I try to let the reader know what year or what decade this story is taking place. So I think that's how music functions. My stories.
I love that second one too. Like, it's a really simple way to get a really relevant like time frame detail, and it does characterization at the same time. And I love things in writing that, like anything you do in writing that if you can do two things at once, it always feels, or more, it always feels better to me. And so I think song inclusions,
it's pulling its weight. Yeah.
And you mentioned MTV, and like this is just a random aside. I worked in television for years, and still my greatest regret was that I was not of a generation where I could have ended up working at MTV in the 80s. I feel like that was probably the greatest job, like as a television producer. But yeah, anyway, that's just an MTV aside. Like, I watched those old, like, they could do whatever they wanted and just play some music. And
it was, anything. I don't know if that was a good thing, but it worked for us. He could have been, what was his name? Loader, the next, was it Mike Loader? I forget.
Yeah. He was around forever though, right? He
was on forever.
Yeah. So more in general, you said you're a music fan, you still have your playlist. How does music influence your writing in general? Are you a person who thinks of like the rhythm of your prose? Are you a person who, like, from the lyrics that you've memorized, that influence word choice or preference for arrangement of sounds?
Yeah, I think it does influence the rhythm of my word choice. I was just thinking of a Stevie Nicks song, and I remember I wrote, like, one of my first stories that I wrote, I started off the story with "Outside the rain," Lola was watching Pedro or something like that. But I remember, it's like, why did I write "Outside the rain"? Well, that's the beginning of one of Stevie Nicks's songs. And so I find that, I've absorbed so much music, I guess, but it comes into my stories sometimes. And sometimes the syntax, the word placement also comes into play in my exposition or in the dialogue even. So, music has a huge influence. I'm not a musician myself, but, I admire those who are musicians. I dated a couple of them.
I'm so sorry.
Not the same. Yeah, I know. Not the same.
I was a music major, so that's a joke said to myself as well. So sorry, all you musicians out there.
No, they're just, well, writers, what can I say about writers too? Dated a few of those also. But yeah, no, it's just the wording, the rhythm, because yeah, I mean, English, I used to teach in Japan, and one of the things that I discovered was that English does have a rhythm. It goes, that whole iambic pentameter that you see in, Shakespeare's plays or poems, that's English. It goes up and down and up and down. And in Japan, I remember I studied Japanese for 4 years, and they do have a rhythm, but I don't think that's pronounced as English. Of course, like the Romance languages like Spanish, they do it, but I don't write in Spanish. But yeah, no, just the rhythm of English, I think it's there. You just really have to pay close attention to it.
That's interesting. So part 2 of this question series was food, and I think you answered. So you mentioned earlier that part of the reason you include food is because you want that 5th sense, the sense that I sort of as a writer tend to ignore. You want to get that taste sensation in there, and that's a great answer. I'm wondering, speaking of things doing 2 things at once, is there a second role that food ends up having when it appears in your writing?
Yeah, I think I use it. I mean, for me, food is culture, right? Any culture, even like American culture, right? Whether it's a peanut butter sandwich or a quesadilla, it denotes something about the character, what they're eating. And it's nourishment. I think when a character like Angelina, I'll do Act of Faith again, Angelina is making the chiles en nogada. She's trying to nourish herself because of the heartbreak. She's trying to do that to her friends and her son and her son's friend. So it does have a different, I mean, it evokes other meanings too, I'd like to think. But I think for the other layer too is the cultural aspect that it brings to the stories. I mean, Mexican culture obviously is rich with food, but there are different types of areas in Mexico that have different types of food. My parents are from Jalisco and Chihuahua, and that food is different from Oaxaca or from Yucatan. So the food I usually use is mostly, northern Mexico or Jalisco. So again, it denotes where the character is from, where they're coming from, the area. So yeah, so that I think it just, yeah, besides taste, it also evokes culture and the character.
I think there's really something sometimes just very pleasing about a good food preparation scene or an eating scene. I'm thinking, connecting back to Japan, then Haruki Murakami will just have someone making spaghetti for a scene that, and I'm not sure I can dig in there and find any deep particular symbolic meaning to the making spaghetti, other than that this action is pleasing to observe in written form. So I feel like some of that was coming through in your writing too. Like I just felt pleased that I was enjoying this. And
that's good.
So going to the chat window for a minute, we do have some questions coming in. And the first one is a really good broad question. And it's, when did you know I am a writer?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think I knew I was a writer when I was young, maybe a teenager, but I didn't really take myself seriously until I hit my 20s, late 20s, early 30s. I think the year I got divorced is from my first marriage is when it really hit me. It's like, you know what? I'm never going to, get permission from others to be a writer. So I'm going to give myself permission now, because why not? When I was younger, when I told my mom I wanted to be a writer, she's like, "¿Qué es eso? What's that? What are you going to do with that? Are you going to be able to make money? Do you mean you want to be a teacher? Because at least as a teacher, you'll get a steady paycheck." And so I always waited, like the good Mexican daughter. You're like, "Oh, get permission first," but that doesn't work. So I finally, after 30 years, I said, "You know what? Screw it. I'm going to be a writer." Okay. I've always wanted to be a writer. I'm going to do it now.
Well, I'm glad that happened. I'm glad you reached that moment.
Too.
Yeah. So this is a really great question too. And this is sort of similar to the last question we tend to ask in events. So this may be a better version of that question, which is a little more specific than our usual one, which is, what advice do you have for all of the young Chicanas in East LA who share your love of writing as a writer and author? what do you know now that you wish you would have known early in your career?
Oh, have a writing group. Get together with your comadres, maybe compadres too, all your friends who love to write, who appreciate the written word, and write together. Because not only do you get to write, you get to support each other and root for each other. Whenever, you apply for a contest or you're applying to grad school, for a writing program or a residency, have your fellow writers there. I think that's what I started to do once I got really serious with my writing. I joined writing groups, and not just one. I joined several. I created writing groups because they're a source of support. Yes, writing is a solitary business. I know that. For me, and maybe this isn't for everybody, but I know that for me, I needed that encouragement, that mutual support with by other writers. The second piece of advice is to read a lot. Just read. Read who you think you love, read who you hear about, read everything. I mean, not just because I love to read short stories. I love to read novels. I love to read poetry. Essays is another thing that I'm starting to really enjoy. Memoirs. Um, when I was younger, I remember I used to read the backs of cereal boxes. We didn't have the phones back then. I mean, it's different now. You can read with your phone, you have novels on your phone. You can access essays and poetries, or poetry. So yeah, get a writing group, read and write, even if it's just for 10 minutes a day. Usually I write in my journal. Journaling is a good habit to pick up too. Journal every day. I journal 3 pages a day at least. Because even if you don't do if you miss doing your chapter for your novel, at least you wrote something in your journal. And sometimes I use the things that are in my journal, what I've written down, and put them into my stories too. So it could do double duty.
That's great. So we have been corrected on the first name of, it's Kurt Loder.
Kurt Loder.
Yes.
Yes. I knew it wasn't Mike Loder.
I was thinking Keith, so I got in the K, but I couldn't figure.
Oh, okay, you were in the right track.
I was still wrong everywhere else. Yeah.
Syllable. Kurt Loder. Yes.
Yeah. So another question from the chat. Are your short stories based on real events, memories, or feelings from childhood? And how do your stories evolve from truth? And I might say, how do they relate to truth?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think somebody once told me they don't necessarily have to be true. That's the beauty of fiction. They don't necessarily have to be true, but they have to feel true. So yeah, I think most writers, that old adage of writing what you know fits in different ways here for me. Because I do take feelings and some memories from my past and put them into my stories. It's like, when I felt like really crappy, when I divorced from my first marriage, it's like, how do I translate that into the page? How did I feel back then when I was first going through this divorce? So, that's what you try to do. You try to recreate. And even if you I have stories told from male points of view too, and I'm like, how would a man feel, if they, were struggling to support their family? How do they, process these feelings of frustration and, this feeling of uselessness or powerlessness? And so, I just try to humanize. It's like, how do I feel as a human being when I am frustrated with something? So, yeah, you try to make it feel real in fiction. Memoir is a different, animal because you tell your actual story, but with fiction, you try to translate what you felt. Falling in love. Everybody falls in love. How do you do that? How do you make it real for your reader?
Right. So another really great, the chat is coming through with A+ questions right now, so I'm very excited by this. So another great question is, when you write these stories, how dependent are you on the reader knowing the character? For instance, someone from the Midwest would never know what a chola is, for instance. How do you attempt to overcome that?
I think humanizing. I mean, one of my favorite writers is Jane Austen, too, right?
Mhm.
And I love the way she makes me laugh. She makes me feel sympathy for her female protagonists. And, this is Regency England. This is a different class, but yet she helps me empathize with Elizabeth Bennet or with, I forget Anne. I forgot what her last name is. Um, but how do writers do that in general? How do they make you feel? So I think the successful writers, it doesn't matter where they're from or where they live, as long as you humanize your characters, because everybody knows what falling in love is like. Everybody knows what frustration is like. I mean, look at Shakespeare. I mean, the language is. When my students read that, they're like, "What language is this?" And I'm like, "That is actually English, but this is Renaissance English." But the emotions are the same. They love. Their favorite is, of course, Romeo and Juliet, because it's about love, it's about jealousy, it's about vengeance. How does Shakespeare still connect with this modern readership still? So I think if you think of it that way, it shouldn't matter as long as the writer is effective.
Mhm. I mean, I think too, practically speaking, you were just earlier naming neighborhoods in LA, and I've been to LA briefly twice, so I had no idea what you're talking about, but I did not feel like I did not know these characters. Like these characters and I may not, I didn't necessarily know every single thing that someone coming who'd lived in one of these neighborhoods in the 80s would know, but I didn't feel lost or stranded. So you are giving the relevant details along the way to orient me as a reader who didn't have necessarily relevant experience. So I think you did
Mhm.
that wonderfully too. So I don't know what that process is, but you did it and it worked. So
Oh, yay, thank you.
so, a great revision question that just came in from Karen. How do you know when your revision time is over and your book is done or a individual story is done?
Oh, that's a good question. Sometimes it just feels complete. Um, the story feels complete. This collection of short stories took me a long time. It took me about 20 years to get it done. So, but a lot of it, a lot of things happened in between. I mean, some writers are different. They can get collections done in like 1 to 2 years. Some of us take a while. And life happens. It gets, and it gets in the way sometimes. But you just know, like with this collection, I just knew it was done, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to start sending it out again. I had sent it out before to contests, and I always got like finalists. I never got the publication, so I would just keep rewriting. I'm like, yeah, they're right. Because what was helpful too were the editors would send me feedback, very useful feedback about my stories and what they thought was missing from the stories that would have actually helped me, make it to the publication stage. Um, and I think with this one, I think I had taken all the advice and like, I'm gonna start sending out my collection again, and hopefully somebody will think it's complete. And yes, they did. Sometimes you just know, and this is why you also have your writing groups too to help you with feedback. They'll tell you it's like, this story feels like it could be expanded a little more. It's a little too short, or the character seems flat. I mean, and sometimes it'll resonate, sometimes it won't, and that's okay too. You don't have to take every piece of advice your writing group gives you, but when it does resonate, pay attention and see what you can do with it. I know there are still other writers too who, after publication, they still go back and revise those same stories. I'm like, that is crazy. I'm not, I mean, it's not crazy, but I'm like, I don't think I could do that. I'm like, once it's done, it's out in the world and we're good.
I mean, and you're never actually, there's no end. You could keep revising forever. I know
Yes.
in the copy of my novel that I read for events, there were like little bits of sticky note put over lines that I realized I would have, like, there's a whole paragraph I cut in my readings. I realized that had I read this out loud to myself, I practiced and I read it like 30 times. If I'd done those 30 extra revisions, that paragraph wouldn't have survived. So you can revise
Yes.
endlessly, but
Yes.
at some point Bye.
Yeah, you gotta
See you
let it
later.
go.
Yeah.
You gotta let it go.
This question seems like a good follow-up because we're sort of talking process of stories and story collections a little bit here, I think. Have some of your stories in your book, were some of those first published in literary magazines or other places? And did you have any problems getting permissions to publish your stories in your book?
Yes, they were actually published in other stories or in other literary journals. Act of Faith was published in a collection, an anthology called Latinos in Lotus Land. Powder Puff was published and republished in first published in Huizache, which is a beautiful literary journal out of University of Houston, Victoria, I think, and it's edited by Dagoberto Gil. I don't know if it's still around. I think it's on hiatus. I also published Angry Blood, the one about the mother pushing her daughter into prostitution. That was first published in Kweli Journal, an amazing online journal that I highly recommend. And Powder Puff was republished in Asterix, which is another amazing literary journal run by Angie Cruz, who published Dominicana. She's an amazing writer too. So yeah, and I didn't have any problems because usually when you publish with the literary journal, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you still get the rights, to send it out somewhere else. The only thing they ask you is, when you first send it out, is that it hasn't been published anywhere else.
Yeah, I believe, and that I am not a legal expert, so please don't hold me as like solid advice, but I think it's first North American serial rights, meaning they get the right to publish it first. And and generally that means too that as soon as that print issue or digital issue is done, rights immediately revert to the author. So that's pretty standard in my story. I don't know. I mean, I don't know anyone who's had this issue. And if someone had an issue with a rights issue for a story, that would be a horror story among writers. It would be like some very fringe publication messing with people or doing something shady. So that's generally, I mean, pretty much any story collection, those at least a significant portion of the stories were published somewhere before they were in a collected form. So, and I don't know that as it's certainly not a chronic issue among writers publishing story collections.
No, it's not.
On the issue of stories collections, though, before I hop back into the chat questions, you sort of covered how these stories originated individually, but I'm also interested in how they interrelate. I mean, there's obvious, like the setting and the time frame are obviously connections, but is there anything else, any less obvious connections among these stories?
I think they also have a religious, I think there's some form of Catholicism referenced in many of the stories, I think, because originally my intention for this collection was to write about each of the sacraments in Catholicism and Mexican Catholicism. So the first one references the quinceañera, which isn't an official, Catholic sacrament, but it's done in the church. I mean, the ceremony is usually held in the church with the parents and the damas and the chambelanes and all that. So I think that's why I titled my collection Chola Salvation too. I mean, there is sort of this religious motif going on through many of them, like even St. Patrick's Day, right? St. Patrick, Catholic saint, and the nuns are in there too.
I love the nuns.
The drinking nuns. And I think that's something that I played with in terms of a theme about finding salvation. How do these characters find salvation? Some of them do, some of them don't. But I also like the idea of maybe the reader finding some kind of, or having an epiphany, which is also a religious term too. So I think that's another a theme or motif that runs, I think, throughout most of the stories.
That's great. Just one more practical question, which I think a lot of people sometimes ask, is how did you order the stories in your book? For example, why is that first story first? Because it sort of, in a way, feels a little bit like an outlier from some of the other ones. But how did this? Was there a lot of thought process going to the order, or just sort of mixtaped it and threw things together in what felt okay.
Oh yeah, no, there was some thought going through like the placement of each of the stories. I think the first story, the titular story, was placed there because it has the language, it has the setting. I think it's like a strong East LA setting. We have the cholas that are iconic to East LA. And so I just wanted to, this is, if we're going to keep with the food, metaphor, it's like this is the appetizer in a way, because it's going to give you the flavor of East LA and the characters in there. That defiant, those defiant characters are scattered throughout all these stories too, because there is a sense of defiance going on there. So yeah, there was some method to this madness. And I'm looking at the order right now. Let's see. Yeah, so I think I wanted to keep it. I wanted to change up the voices. So I think the first two stories we have teen girls, and then as protagonists, and then Sábado Gigante is a male protagonist that we have there, and then Powder Puff we have an older woman. St. Patrick's Day, we have an adult male or adult man. So I think I also wanted to change up the voices and the protagonists and sort of mix them and sort of go from light to dark, or in terms of the themes. Some of them are really heavy. There's a reason why Angry Blood is in the middle. That's the one with the mom and the prostitute, or the prostituting her daughter. And Little Soldiers is also a pretty heavy story. So this is why I think I put them in the middle of the collection. And I think we get a little bit lighter towards the end. There's more, I don't know, there's more hopefulness. There's more, not bravery, but I think there's more self-actualization, realization towards the end of the collection, with how to tell a true East LA story. And I wanted to end with that story. It's like, how do we tell a true East LA story? With humanity, I think I wanted to end with that.
How many stories are there? Someone actually asked that in the chat window. What's the total?
That's a good question. I was going to count 1, 2, 6, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16.
Yeah, because there are a few in there that are fair, like on the shorter side, and there are a few longer ones. So that's a decent number of stories in the collection. So back to the chat window. A lot of the Chicano Latino stories have universal American dream type themes. How did you decide which stories to tell?
That's a good one. Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, what is the American dream? I think you have to really define that. I mean, being independent, feminism, I think runs strongly. I think that's part of the American dream, because I think many of my characters, including the male characters, struggle with the patriarchy that may be prevalent in the culture. I mean, it is prevalent in the culture. What am I saying? And this struggle, I mean, you have that freedom here in this country. Going to school, one of my characters goes to a 4-year university away from home. And when I was growing up back in the 80s, it was hard for my friends when they got accepted to colleges that were, like one friend I had was accepted into Harvard, but her parents wouldn't let her go because she would be too far away. They wanted her to stay close to home. And I know it's cliche, but there's a reason why it's cliche. It's true. I got to go to Northwestern. I wanted to go far away. And as much as, I can appreciate East LA now, at the time, I'm like, I got to get out of here. I really do. I just need to see what's beyond LA, what's beyond California. And getting a college education so I could be independent and live on my own, that I think that's part of the American dream for women. Women from cultures where women are expected to become wives and mothers, and it's like, no, I want to be more. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want that, go ahead. I mean, having the choice, that's what feminism is about, right? Having the choice. I could be a mother or I could be a college student. You know what? Maybe I can be both. Or maybe I just want one. So I think having choices and acting on those choices, for me, that's my American dream. I think I put that into my characters and into my stories.
I love that. Yeah, and I definitely see that coming through. Um,
Mhm.
so starting with a comment before I go back to the question from the chat, the comment was, I love how you mix English and Spanish seamlessly. It's wonderful to hear, and the mix of languages is such a familiar experience for many. That followed a sort of practical question. For the words dialogue in Spanish, do you italicize them? This person has been, Grace has been italicizing them for non-English words as the norm for 30 plus years, but now I understand some writers want to normalize non-English words in regular non-italicized font. What do you do, and do you have any thoughts, I guess, on that subject more broadly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's been a struggle. I think you know, I italicize. That's a personal choice. I think when I write, I don't tend to italicize. Arte Público, our publisher, my publisher, that's my dream publisher. They tend to they've been italicizing Spanish words since the beginning. I think that's their house, rule. It's like we italicize it, and that's that. It's like, okay, that's cool. That is your choice. That's fine. Personally, I think if I had my druthers, I wouldn't, because I think it is part, when I see a different language, like even if it's like Japanese, Chinese, and it's not italicized, I'm like, hey, that's fantastic, right? Because what it says or what it denotes for me is that this is natural. This is normalized for me and my community that we mix, Vietnamese with the English, with, slang, and it's like swearing or you don't it adds some flavor to your story. I remember there was one writer who said these are your tools, your language, whether it's Spanish or Dene or Filipino, these are your tools for creating your story. And I got a lot of pushback. I remember when I was first starting out, because um, the other writers in my workshop would say, well, why don't you give us a glossary? Why don't you give us, footnotes to explain what this word means? And I'm like, no, use the context, right? When I was reading, Shakespeare or even like T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, I didn't get a glossary. I had to like work to create this meaning. And that's fine. I love it. That's the joy of reading and trying to figure out what is this writer trying to say to me. It's not an issue. And these days when we have, a cell phone, when we could easily look up words, it's like, come on, people. It's not like back in again, I'm going to go back to, and now I'm really feeling old. It's like back in my day, we had to go lug this big old dictionary and look up words. It's like, you can look it up here on your phone now. So, there's no excuse. Same with Jane Austen. I didn't know every word that she used, but I looked it up on my own, and I felt richer for doing that. The struggle makes it worth it. I don't know. For me, I feel like it's lazy when people say, well, why don't you put a glass? It's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone. Actually, I'm not sorry.
I sometimes when I read too, if I'm reading something and don't want to interrupt the flow, I mean, before the era of cell phones and instant gratification, I always kept an index card as a bookmark, and I always had a pen with me, and I would jot down the words that I either didn't know, wasn't super familiar with, or like felt like I was missing nuance. And then at the end of the session, I go back and maybe go back. I didn't always want to stop reading in the moment, because sometimes that moment, if the prose is flowing, I don't want to stop and interrupt that with my own thought processes. Yeah. But I did want to know what that word meant later. So it was real quickly, just jot down that word on the index card and go back to it. And I did that for years.
I was scribbling in the margins, and I would fold the page, and I'm like, I got to go back and figure out, or even and sometimes I would stop, and I'm like, I'm going to look up this word because it's going to bother me that I don't know what this means or why she's saying it this way. But yeah, I mean, with the internet, the rules change, and I'm like, there's no excuse for anybody not to be able to look up something. Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry. Sorry. I got my little ear thing.
Oh, no worry. A book publication question, which I like, which is, who designed your front cover? Because it's a really excellent front cover.
Oh, yeah, no, I love this. It was actually the original design, which I found I had initially seen on Redbubble. I don't know if you're familiar with Redbubble, but it was by an artist named A.V. Phipps, I think. And the publisher sent first this to me, which is actually on my phone cover. So I'd seen it used for phone cover. She sent it, the publisher sent me this, first this picture and then the design with the title name later. And I'm like, that's the Chola, or that's my Virgen, the Guadalupe, right? It's just perfect, except she has black hair. The Virgen in my story has blonde hair. But you know what? Who cares? She looks amazing. So yeah, so the artist is A.V. Phipps. I think she goes by Evil Kid Art. So look her up on Redbubble, and you could. She sells all kinds of things with this image on it: skirts, shirts, coffee tumblers. So.
Oh, that's great. So you had some say with cover then.
Oh yes, yeah. Yes. Go
ahead.
I initially had sent them some ideas by an artist here in Tucson who's actually from East LA. And her name is Melo, their name is Melo Dominguez. But then the publisher said, no, we have maybe something that might be better. It will be a better fit. And I'm like, yeah, well, this is perfect. We have a Virgen, so.
I mean, and it's interesting too, like depending, like with my story collection, I chose the art. I pointed something and we contacted the artist and they said, yes, let's go with it. My novel, they sent me a cover. Unfortunately, I love the cover, but they sent it to me. And I mean, I probably could, if I hated it, I probably could have protested, but you really don't have, they asked no input from me. They just sent the thing, it arrived and had some elements I was thinking of and some things I liked that I hadn't thought of. But that's a really interesting part of the process, how hands-on you are and weird little aspects of bookmaking depending on the publisher.
Yeah, because maybe it's because it's a smaller publisher, but I had also been told by another author who was published by the same publisher to like make some suggestions, because he didn't, and he wasn't really happy with his cover. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have a bunch of suggestions. You don't need to ask me twice. I have them. So.
Well, I think we're out of questions in the chat, and I feel like we've reached a good stopping point right here. This is a really fantastic book. So again, I just encourage everyone to get a copy. It's a wonderful read. And is it officially available now, or are we still in a pre-order phase for the book too?
We're still in a pre-order phase. I think copies are going to start being shipped mid-June.
Okay, so not too long then. Yeah, I did notice.
Not too long. Next month.
I think the publisher's website did have a pre-order link up now too, so it should be able to take care of all those elements as well.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, but thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for coming out. This is a great book. Please get a copy. Please check out the Writers Center and join us for the next one of these. I think we have one next week.
Yay! Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Mil gracias a todos y a todas.